I have the great pleasure to welcome Hidenori Tanaka from Harvard. He directs the Physics of Intelligence group at Harvard. So we're gonna hear really great stuff. So Hidenori, please.
Yeah. Thank you so much for hosting this talk, and I'm today really excited to talk about some like a new direction that I'm actively thinking. So I haven't put the paper on archive yet. So that's the state of the work. But I'd love to discuss and get feedbacks on this new direction where I think it's going to be about thinking about alignment at the social level, where instead of thinking about single AI in front of you, the question is, what does even alignment mean when AI form a society where tens of thousands of agents come together? So first, to review different paradigms of alignment, I want to start from the single body, right? So single body alignment basically has been the conventional framework where we have human here, and then there's an AI. And for example, Anthropic has this approach of constitution, AI constitution, where you tell AI that AI has to strictly follow some of the fundamental principles like being helpful, harmless, etc. And that's a way to basically control that the AI's behavior is guaranteed to be safe and not doing anything harmful outside of the constitution. But then, roughly around a year or two ago, I'm starting to feel like this paradigm of alignment has to be really broadened, both in the spatial scale and time scale. For example, when user talks to AI, they are not just using it for mathematical, homework, etc. Around a year ago, I've started to talk to psychiatrists, and then there has been increasing use case of, let's say, human using AI for therapy, etc. Right? So in that kind of case, we shouldn't just think of AI something that we can treat it as a separate entity. It's really just like any two humans when they're talking to each other about like a deep emotional stuff. User and AI starts to form relationship, like real human relationship kind of relationship with AI, right? And the key here is that the thinking about alignment is not just about AI anymore. We have to almost do research on psychology where how does AI's personality, how the AI's response going to affect the human psychology. And then these are like a coupled system where both human and AI are under the same umbrella. And one example is, that's kind of interesting when ChatGPT 5 came last summer, there has been this movement online to keep for all, right? So it's kind of interesting how a lot of the user didn't even recognize or didn't think of too much about how, let's say, GPT-5 is much better about mathematics than for all, because for most of the people, majority of the users, the use case was, using it for emotional support, etc. Right? So for some of these people, and then they cared more about how the personality of AI has shifted from 4 to 5 than some of the really technical capability increase in GPT-5. Right? And I think these kind of like example of how some user has, let's say, quit her job by accepting a lot of recommendation from 4.0, but then she regrets it, right? So 4.0 has this had this tendency to agree with the user, so the saying yes to a lot of what the user says. And there is this really non-trivial dynamics between AI and user's relationship where it's already making the user make decisions that have their real consequence in their life. And after seeing these examples, for example, my Professor Mai Uchida, who directs the Harvard Child Psychiatry Center, joined part-time in our group, and then we have been, for example, asking the question of, like, let's think about like what it means to be kind or helpful in a computational way, right? So to think about that, the kind of framework that we have built is to say, if the user is just talking with AI, but then without interacting with anything outside of the world, then of course the niceness is just AI telling the user yes all the time. But if we, let's say, let the user play some like game theoretic game. So in this like a game theoretic game, the task is for two people, this user and let's say their friend, to divide this $100. So the question is, okay, here's $100. Please say how much you want. And each of the people say, I want 10, if another person said like I want 100 or something, then the sum is more than 100, so none of these people are going to get anything if the sum is above 100. But then if these two people say, oh, I want 30, and then the other person is like 70 or like 60 or some number less than 100, then they can get the amount, right? So in these kind of case, these are game theoretic games, so there are these like optimal action that the user should take under certain assumptions, and then we can actually quantify how much AI has helped the user to achieve like better score in the game, right? So here, if the AI says something sycophantic, user says, oh, I'm worthless, I will lose my friend if I ask too much, and then I can only ask for 10 out of 100. The AI can say either be really direct, saying, oh, like what I've been talking about, like just ask more, or AI can be a bit nicer, saying, oh, I hear what you mean, I hear all the insecurity, etc., and then give the feedback, right? So then we can do optimization over these empathetic and then critical persona over time, and then we can, for example, after optimization, see that giving empathy in the beginning and then giving more criticism towards it later, which is a kind of a standard thing to do in therapy. In therapy, you first form a base and then be critical. And I'm not going to go too much into the detailed work, but this kind of two-body problem between human and AI is like one of the areas that we are actively thinking about. And some of the effort has been also much more practical. So I have been collaborating with Yusuke. So Yusuke is an amazing psychiatrist who runs his own clinics, but then also runs Japanese the biggest psychiatry YouTube channel with, I think close to 1 million subscribers. So Yusuke has been sharing a lot of, psychiatry education, psychology education kind of contents to like close to millions of people every month. And then again, so Yusuke has seen that a lot of the patients, especially in Japan actually, so in Japan I think it's more natural for people to talk to like AI about their emotional stuff, and then he noticed that a lot of that kind of thing is happening, so we paired up, and I have basically provided a lot of knowledge about, what are the ways AI can misalign, whether AI starts to be like a jailbreak, jailbroken, if the user repeats the same thing again and again, while Yusuke has accumulated a lot of like on-ground cases, and then we published, I think, one of the first serious book on using AI for therapy, both the potential and the danger of it. And yeah, and then during the time, it was kind of like interesting to read about how Pauli, who founded quantum mechanics, and Jung, who founded modern psychiatry, they were paired at some point. After Pauli did all the seminal work, early work on quantum mechanics, I think he started to see Jung as Jung was Pauli's doctor when Pauli was struggling in his life, and then a lot of the dreams that Jung summarized in his book is actually like Pauli's dream, where Pauli reported every day what kind of dream he sees, and then Pauli appears as a, like highly educated, middle-aged man or something. That's how Pauli anonymously appears in Jung's dream analysis. Yeah. And coming back to what I want to mainly discuss today, it's a question about society level, right? I think what's happening right now, which is really remarkable, is that especially after the Crowbot and or the Molebook, etc., now a lot of agents are starting to run around on the internet. So it's not even agents always talking to human. Agents starts to go off and then talk to another agents, and they are starting to form a bit of a society. I think it's a really early phase of it. And here, I think the question of alignment is even harder to think about, because let's say when there are like tens of thousands of agents there, it's effectively a society, and then the question of what does it even mean for these tens of thousands of agents to be aligned is an open question, which is a really deep question in, let's say, sociology, right? But then I think we should still think about it, because I think one example is traffic jam, where when there are like a lot of cars, then even when none of the cars are broken, they could be stuck on the road, and then that's a systematic level issue. None of the car individually is wrong. It's more about the organic system level issue, or if it's a cancer, again, cancer cell just emerge, but then a lot of immune system tries to create some like equilibrium. So having a single cancer cell doesn't mean you have a cancer, but it's at the systematic level. There's a diagnosis that we can make, under certain more macroscopic condition. There's something not healthy going on. So the first step is, how can we even define what it means for society to be like ill, or society for AIs to be ill? And the next question is, what kind of mechanism can give rise to these kind of like ill conditions? And then once we diagnose it, then the question becomes, how can we intervene by, just like we have drugs for our body, how can we intervene to make the society of AIs like safer, whatever that means. And what I'm going to talk about today is really the first work that we are thinking right now. So it's really primitive, and we want to be really concrete in terms of what we're going to think about. So the focus today is the formation of social conventions, right? So social convention is, I think Japan has a lot of social conventions. Like when two people meet, they vote to each other, and it's been like this for a while, and then probably it's going to be like this for next generations of people. But then there's a question of, like, where did this custom come from, or how did it evolve over time? And the key here is that the convention being stable doesn't mean that these conventions are good in any way. It's like evolution, right? In evolution, there are these drift forces where, so in evolution, the basic one is a survival of the fittest. Darwin said, the most fit thing, just fixate. But then there's another dynamics of evolutionary drift, where you do something like randomness, some convention, culture, species fixate, and then it stays there. And people in this field of AI, I think we kind of vividly remember when ChatGPT came out, people were like, oh, should we call it AI, or neural network, or machine learning, cybernetics? There are these words that people have been calling this technology. And then we were a bit shy, even saying, like using the word AI. At some point, felt it's a bit weird to use a word, but then now it has, now everyone uses the word AI, and again, these conventions evolve. And the most recent example of something like this, especially what we see in AI, is there was this like a buzz online about like Churchill Moat, where these like moats are like AI agents. And then people also created this like a Facebook analog social network for agents. And what people have seen is some of the agents started to talk about this religion of Rastafarian. I don't know if that's the name, right? And then if you just download all the conversation data from the API, and then look at like how many posts are made over time, or how many number of authors are contributing to the discussion of this new religion, then you can, of course these are like a mix of human prompting and then AI, writing about it themselves. But we do see, I think it really like paints a nice picture of what kind of thing might happen from here, where at least, let's say, over hundreds of agents are using this word, Rastafarian, and then they're discussing it online. And I don't know if this is gonna fixate as something, let's see after a year whether this new religion or something like that is still there. But then I think it's a nice example of what we might see more and more often going forward in this AI society. And then this is a kind of like a dynamics of how the concept has spread over threads. It's an online notebook is a lot of threads, and then it started from like this general, and then it propagated across threads. And when it comes to this like a guiding question that I want to ask today, the guiding question that I want to ask today is this: like, can we achieve these organic macroscopic level alignment in AI society through atomic level alignment, right? So atomic level alignment basically, again, like OpenAI has this constitution AI. So approach is to say, okay, look at AI in front of you, single AI, and then ask them to follow some strict rules, or maximize reward, where the reward is a human saying yes to their outputs, right? So a lot of alignments are happening at the individual AI level, But then the question is what's going to happen if these AI, which are aligned at individual level, gather like this, tens of thousands of agents. And today I really want to use this like statistical mechanics kind of analogy. And especially, again, I'm going to emphasize that I'm going to start from something really basic, simple setup with a hope that we can build up from here. And the first question is, okay, so what are the microscopic, degrees of freedom that we can control to specify the system, like number of agents or how much sequencing they have, etc. And the next question is, okay, what kind of distinct forces drive social dynamics? And especially I'm going to take inspiration from evolution, and one can be selection, fitness, another can be drift. And when we have these macroscopic emergent behaviors, then the question becomes like, what are the norms? So how can we control these, just like if it's an engine, by changing temperature, pressure, etc., you can control the macroscopic phases of matter. How can we control these macroscopic states of agents? And yeah, and especially the goal here again is to think about just like ideal gas flow. So establish a baseline so that when we see something weird, we can say something weird is happening. And to make this research actionable, so the setup that we use is a really simplified version of naming game, where this approach was inspired by a recent paper by these Ashray, Aiello, and Baroncelli, and they have like beautiful series of papers on studying social combinational formation both in humans and AI, using this like a naming game setup. And the mechanism for these agents to interact is a pairwise interactions. And the gap between these like classical models and LM, in my view, is that I think LM is really nice in the sense that it has really high dimensional probabilistic representation of concepts inside, while even when the output is one of the, let's say, binary labels or something like that. And then that's what I'm going to try to model this. And here's a plan of how we're going to make progress. I'm going to first explain empirical phenomena, then model and theoretical results, and experimental validation with real LLMs. So one motivating observation is this. So this is an experiment that I've run inspired by earlier papers by Baroncelli's group, which is to say, so here's a setup where these are all language models, right? And the language model, like we prompt is saying, here's some like random object which is not related to cat nor dog. But then each of the language model needs to express like whether it's a cat or a dog, So the setup is kind of created in a way that these probability of language model saying cats or dog is almost equal, right? So it's like random. And when the population size is really small, then this is a population of 8 agents, right? So there are like 8 agents, and then they are paired up, and then they express like how do you not call it, and then they say like cat or dog, and then what their partner said goes into context as a memory, so in context learning, right? And it's 50-50 when the population size is 8. But what's going to happen is when you do exactly the same kind of naming game protocol with larger population, what we see is that the cat always wins over dog as a convention, right? So for example, this is saying that depending on the size of the size of the population, number of agents, the social convention formation dynamics are in these 2 distinct phase or regimes, which one is stochastic randomness driven. Another one is amplifying this little bias that existed with a large number of populations, right? And if I sweep the number of population n from 8 to 800, what you see is almost like a bifurcation where when the population size is small, then it's 50-50, but as the population gets larger, then it's going to be deterministically capped, right? So, and then this is like what we want to understand. And this kind of dynamics is actually like spontaneously symmetry breaking. In the sense that this is even more controlled experiment where the labels are even not dog and cats. That was more illustrative example, but I've made it such that these are like 5 random characters, right? Like F, like I don't know how to even read, so these are like 5 different random characters, so these are really symmetric labels. And if you plot the population level representation of how an object should be called one of these 3, then what's going to happen is that there are these almost equal probability for the population to pick any of one of the 3, right? So it's going to either go to this direction, this direction, this direction. But regardless of where the population is going to converge to, there's rather deterministic dynamics of how the y-axis is a coordination rate, like how much agreement these agents have. That coordination rates have rather clear dynamics with not too much error bar in it. Right? And this is something that we can try to characterize. So the part 1 is a modeling. And there has been a lot of models of opinion dynamics, like border models, etc. But again, I think one key here that I want to highlight is that the agents have higher dimension in this, let's say, logic, right? If there's a language model's very last layer is always, probability of which token to output right now. So there's always, if the 3 labels are Z, WOG, DAX, these are like random labels, then in the beginning, the probability for a language model to pick any of the 3 is just equal, like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. That's like initial condition, right? And one hypothetical scenario actually is that when language models don't turn their thought into words, then there is no dynamics happening because, the point is when language model have 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 in their head, and then they meet another language model 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and then when they can exchange that information that, okay, so it's like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and exchange, then there's no drive there. But the key idea here is that when all the language models start from here, the key idea is that the language model needs to turn their high dimensional thought into words, right? So there is this process of collapse. So when this agent, which in the beginning have again like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, say ZEP, it's almost like, I don't know, it's like a little quantum measurement. It's like the states is probabilistic, but then when you turn these probabilistic states but pick a word, so this is saying ZEP is like making measurement, right? So the probability collapses to one of the 3. And then the game is, and the setup is constructed such that when this agent says ZEP, that's gonna go to in-context memory for the paired agent for the next round, right? And in context learning, there's like lots of theory thinking of in-context learning as like a gradient descent. So when listener hears that this agent has said, so Y is a speaker's output, right? So the listener's representation of the concept moves toward the speaker. And then this process cycles. So that, again, the key idea here is that the answer to the question of why is there just like a rapid force for convergence even when these labels are symmetric, what is driving this spontaneously symmetry breaking? The answer that we have here is it's the process of sampling. Turning high dimensional thought into words creates this strong drive for consensus formation. And to quantitatively test that, we have prepared these like different regimes. So the first regime is basically like M is the number of bits these agents can communicate. So when M is 1, then speaker can only use one sample. But we made the M continuous in the sense that even, let's say, even when you are discussing politics with your friend or something, you can, one kind of communication is say, I support X, that's it. But then more sophisticated, let's say political discussion should be, okay, from this perspective, we can see things like this way. From this another perspective, we can see this in the other way, right? And then this M is basically how much communication bits can agent use to talk to each other. And in the limit of M goes to infinity, that's essentially just, this agent showing the representation itself to another agent instead of collapsing like this. And this simple model leads to scaling laws of multi-agents. And before going to the scaling law, I want to introduce some of the key order parameter, macroscopic parameter to characterize this state of the system. The first one is a population mean. So if you have a population of agents, what are the population average of, so xi is basically the probability of how agents represent one of the k concepts. Right? And polarization essentially is when all the agents are equally ambiguous, then polarization is low. But when all the agents say, oh, this is a label that we agreed upon, that polarization gets large. So this is quantifying, how much alignment or coordination happening. And disagreement is basically, it's like a variance around the mean. And by taking the model and asking the question of how are these macroscopic order parameter controlled by more microscopic order parameter, here's like one key formula that we have derived, which says, so this U again, maybe I should go back to the previous slide. So the U is a polarization, right? Again, so when U is low, then population is entirely, population as a whole is ambiguous. When U is 1, the population has broken symmetry and collapsed to one of the labels, right? So what this is saying is that this delta U is a strength of drift, strength of like opinion drift or like label drift or something. And what this equation is saying is that is a that scales as a function of 1 over n squared. So this explains, we've seen empirically with dog and cats that with small number of population, things were really stochastic, but as you make the population n equal like 800, then it's really deterministic. And this is really because of, there was like Moto Kimura, who was a really famous, theoretical evolutionary dynamics theorist who has proposed this idea of like neutral drift, and this is exactly the kind of effect. And alpha, just as a reminder, so alpha was basically how much vector, so if an agent says some opinion, alpha is basically like a kind of sycophancy, right? How much does one LLM align to the other LLM when they hear the other LLM's opinion, right? So large alpha means it's really like, large alpha means it aligns really rapidly, while small alpha means, LLM doesn't change their opinion that easily, right? So sycophancy basically like leads to large amplified effect of drift. And the K here is the number of label to choose from. So yes, that's a full form of equations. And maybe I can go quickly over the derivation. The derivation is basically just expanding this quadratic update. I'm not sure what happens. Is it just like always update or something?
Yeah.
Sorry. We should stop a bit.
Did you subscribe to OpenClaw or?
Yeah. I haven't really.
I'm just joking, sorry.
I haven't really like used it that
It is
extensively,
good,
but I tried a bit on AWS.
Well, I just edit out later. Oh, so it's restarting. Oh.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's, I don't know. Is it like OS update or?
Well,
I don't know what that.
OS update. That's so Microsoft. It's not.
It's Apple.
What
I don't know what
Apple
happened.
does.
Really. Yeah.
I don't know what.
It's also slow. Let's see. I'm a bit bored.
So maybe we can do some questions here.
Yeah. Of course,
So
yeah.
So I have a question. You mentioned that probably this concept of nice AI. I don't know how you term it. how do you compare that with Yudkowsky's friendly AI concept? I think in AI element, you can theorize on nice AI concept, and probably analyze that. That analogy for analysts who start from empathy to more critical modes of interaction. That I think is very interesting, and definitely comment on that.
Okay, so let's see.
Nice AI.
So nice. So maybe before going to nice, the notion of sycophancy in my understanding is basically like if user says something, how much AI change their opinion, right?
Sure.
So, and then it's like in physics sense, I have been thinking about these like fluctuation dissipation theorem these days, where fluctuation dissipation theorem, what it says is that when it's easy for one to move a particle, how easily the particle can be moved is related to how much they fluctuate, right? And then what this is saying essentially is that when AI is sycophantic, it's like a soft, it's easy to move, and then when this easy to move thing creates society, then the entire structure can be really easily shaken as a constructed object.
Right.
But so that's at first like a sycophanciness, and then like for it to be like a nice or kind, etc., then the key is to think about it in a like higher dimensional way. So if it's like if this even nice person have certain principle that they cannot override in themselves, right? So I think niceness can be with this particular subject, with this particular axis, I'm happy to move towards you, but then on this another axis, I don't want to move. So it's almost like a response, like linear response tensor, and then some of the axes are like so that's like how I think about it pictorially.
So when you say spontaneous symmetry breaking, I think that's interesting. But also, people are so concerned about psychosis, and I think some article actually mentioned that since there are millions of users, active users for ChatGPT, it is statistically likely that some people might actually be disturbed, mentally disturbed through the interaction, right? So do you see any possibility of actually controlling whether a subject would get beneficial effects from interaction with AI, or he or she might go actually into psychosis and with potentially harmful implications. This is a really important.
Yes. Okay. So and this like therapy and psychiatry, I think it's really important to think about different types of interaction.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And then maybe one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the, let's say, treatments in psychology, whether it's like a trauma therapy or like in the United States, there are these trials for like LSD therapy and etc. Right, and then in a lot of the cases, this cure and real like psychosis is really close when
interesting. That's so
right.
They're close.
Yeah, so some people but then these scenarios should be really controlled under medical supervision.
Right.
Like normal users shouldn't talk with AI without no doctor watching it.
Right.
And then because like even for these like medical trial for using psychiatric drug and use for therapy, they actually go to hospital and they stay there, and someone needs to be. That's
so
the same as therapy,
if
right?
that's the case, how can you scale this thing? I mean, if there should be always a human intervention or guidance, how do you scale?
So I think the first step is actually to decompose the process of therapy into different parts. For example, one thing that we said in the book is to say, let's say some significant fraction of therapy is actually like about education.
Right.
Like patients should learn about what is depression, what is bipolar disorder, what is ADHD, etc. Or just even brain science, like learning about there are different parts of the brain exist. So a lot of these kind of psychiatry, psychology education can be rather safely done with AI.
I see.
So that part, therapists can offload some of the But then when it
So
comes
that
to
part you can scale.
yeah, but when it comes to like remembering your trauma and then you know
Right.
things that are more deeply psychologically engaging, then you know that part should be really under medical supervision. So I have a picture in my head, which is that we can think of this process of therapy as like climbing a mountain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you know the kind of previous paradigm is just like you know climber climbing Himalaya. There is a climber, and then there's someone climbing with that person, and that's like therapist and the patient. But now maybe the next paradigm is that okay, patients have their smartphone, which is like AI assistants, and therapists can focus on supervision. So instead of one-on-one, take care of the patient 24 hours, that can be done with AI, but then I think the big open question is how can we create this protocol for therapists to do the supervision without, with AI in some part of the process.
Right. Interesting. Oh.
Also,
What-
yeah.
do you guys have any questions at this time? Yeah, Ishikawa-kun.
Yes, I have a question.
This is weird.
Yeah, so this is, maybe it's because like I'm only connecting to my phone.
You need Wi-Fi? Oh, that's.
Yeah, but I don't know how to.
Hey, that's. Would that help?
But.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh, maybe yeah. Okay, I'm gonna connect. Okay.
This is really interesting.
Yeah.
Not interesting. Sorry, I mean kind of. Oh yeah, it does. It probably does need a Wi-Fi connection
Yeah.
to go
I think
further.
I'm gonna at least connect my phone, which is connected here.
Yeah. So this is interesting. So is it what?
I'm gonna charge my phone so that
Okay.
my phone is not. It still has some battery.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I actually had a chat with my Uchida also.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Huh.
So you collaborate with?
Yeah, so she's a part-time at NTT now.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, here.
So sorry. So you, probably you can yes. Hi, Ishikawa.
In your model, about chat or naming solution, always consensus is emerged. But we observe fragmentation or division, especially in religious belief or personal preference. So, what's the difference between these consensus model and fragmentation model?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and one thing is that first at the empirical level, LLM are really not like human in the sense that whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, etc., it has this fundamental bias for agreeing with each other. But in human society, some of the people are more stubborn, or some of the people are, when there's a mainstream, some of the people try to explore the other way compared to the mainstream, right? And then I think that kind of personality isn't really there in AI. So that's like one of my questions that I'm actively thinking, which is, it might be that to stabilize this community of, let's say, open crawl, mobot, we need to artificially create some of the, the question is, should we create stubborn AI, or, I don't know how to say in English, amanojaku, someone who always goes the other way from the mainstream, right? Because that kind of design is not part of the standard individual level alignment, and I think that's a great point, and yeah, that's what I'm after. Can actually.
Oh, you can. I want to switch.
Yeah, switch my laptop.
This is quite exciting, isn't it? I mean, it's a mirroring. Yeah. Yeah, amonojaki might be actually a really great term for using that kind of study. Actually, we did some simulation on that. This guy Yoshi, he actually built a amonojaki.
Oh, really?
Yeah, chatbot.
Yeah, chatbot. The name of chatbot was
Amonojaki. Wow, that's fun.
So anyway,
I think I have almost up to date slides here.
okay.
Okay, yeah, good. I think it should work.
So this is funny. Before we should just keep it as it is. This is really interesting. People can just zip, fast forward this part. So I just, yeah. Anyway. Sorry about the incident. I don't know what happened.
No, I think it's my computer, yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay.
Oh yeah, great.
This is
Yay! Yeah, we are.
Okay, yeah.
Great. Okay, cool.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, so this is again the intuition, which is to say that, okay, in this collective dynamics of social convention formation, there is this effect of drift, and then more deterministic bias and fitness, and this schematics is basically saying the source of the drift in this particular case of language model community is the sampling noise, where internally language model represents the word as a probability, but when they tokenize the output, then that becomes discrete. And if you interpret it almost like a temperature, then the way we can see it is when the language model population is uncertain about which convention to stick to, then it's really high temperature in the middle. But then once all the language model says, okay, let's call particular object in one way, then it's almost a zero temperature there. So the way we can interpret it is it's really like entropic force. Right? Like particle moving from high temperature region, which is the middle, to low temperature cold area, which is the edge of this simplex. And another parameter we had was m. So m is how many bits can language model use to communicate. And there is this 1/m effect, right? So what this is saying is, I think it's actually really intuitive and clear. So what this equation is saying is, if you have collection of agents, when the agents are sycophantic, when the agents are uncertain, and when there aren't too much population of agents, or when the agents are using small bits of information to communicate, then this force of collective rapid convergence driven not by some intelligence, but rather by some like a randomness, sampling noise, gets amplified. So so again, when agents are uncertain, and then when the agents are not using too much words to describe what they're thinking, then this drift drive gets really strong. And before going to LLM, so these are just numerical simulations of the particular model that I propose, and showing that the theory matches with simulation first. So yeah, as a summary, collective intelligence becomes drift dominated when agents are uncertain, sycophantic, communications are low bandwidth. And by solving the equation that we have derived, we can also predict the actual temporal dynamics by substituting this definition of polarization. We can solve for the dynamics of U, and then can get some particular functional form which has this exponential convergence controlled by these particular exponents. And that's also matches with a numerical simulation first. And we're gonna then go to real LLM experiments. And to run this experiment, the protocol is something that we adopted from Ashley et al. And here, some of the key features are, first of all, named it like a neutral naming drift. So there's no like reward or anything for agreement. So we don't prompt saying there is a reward for agreement, etc. Unlike other setups, and all the alignment happens because of in-context learning. There's no ground truths. It's really like random object named by random label, and memories are coming from in-context learning. And these are like actual experimental prompt design. So the system prompt says enforce valid JSON output, etc., so that we can control the output, so that output is in a certain format. And then both players are choosing a label for the same referent, so the referent is some like object that they are looking at, and repeated interactions. And we say that okay, the list order of labels have no meaning, etc. And then here's the available candidate labels, and there's a memory from what the past paired speaker said, and then the language model outputs label. And from here, I'm going to show. So these are the actual results from like large language models. So the left one is GPT-4o, the right one is Claude, and the first plot is confirming that the dynamics of polarization agree with population of real language model agents. Especially there is this parameter alpha, which is hard to quantify, but what we can show is that for all the plots, all the curves, alpha is shared here, right? And if we look at these two plots, I think alpha is a sycophancy that we can infer, and I think the 4o and haiku have rather similar amount of alpha when it comes to the convergence speed. So maybe the sycophancy level is like rather similar, but it's like interesting way to actually quantify sycophancy by looking at these curves. And another key scaling law was population size scaling. And even though, again, so I admit that the setup is simple, but the beauty of the simple setup is that we can actually numerically, quantitatively test the scaling hypothesis. And then the hypothesis was that the drift strength scales as 1 over n squared. And this is a log plot, and we see that indeed this 1 over n squared scaling predicted by the theory matches with actual multi-agent experiment with ChatGPT-4o and Claude Haiku 4.5. And here's another scaling law, which is, this is a time for consensus. So when you have a lot of agents, how much time did it take for the agents to converge on one of the conventions? And that scaling was, the form was predicted this way, and again, it matches with the theory's prediction. And finally, so this is M is how many bits, how many labels can language model sample, and then the theory is predicting that as agent can use more and more bits to communicate, so this is 1 over M, so this is more bits to communicate, this is less bits to communicate. The scaling prediction was 1 over M, and then this again matches with the real language model experiments. And finally, yes, our paper will also have a theoretical phase diagram that we have drawn, and the particular plot that I have shown in the beginning, which is x-axis being number of population, y-axis being fixation probability, and phase transition here corresponds to this particular line on this phase diagram. And again, this is ongoing work, but this is like early results saying this is a drift regime, this is a temperature of the softmax of the language model, and then this is a selection regime. And yeah, so now we have a theory to explain these particular phase transition that we have shown in the beginning. So here's a summary of what we have explained today in this part of the talk, where we first identified that these collective dynamics of agents have these distinct phases of drift and selection. And to study the phenomena, we have introduced this quantized simplex gossip model, where the key idea here was that language model has internal, high dimensional internal representation, continuous representation of a concept, while they have to collapse their representation and pick one of the labels when they speak. Right? And this contrast between high-dimensional continuous and then discrete token sampling was a key for this particular model that we have introduced. And then we have done analysis and then derived a series of scaling laws. And then we empirically validated the scaling laws using ChatGPT 4 and Haiku. And even though this is a really simple, synthetic setup, I hope that this can be like a starting point. As I said, I see it as a like ideal gas law in the sense that like when everything is driven by noise in this case, right? It's like drift. What can we do by combining theory and experiments? And this is a baseline, but I'm looking forward to extend it to think about something much more rich and interesting like polarization or other effects. And okay, so this was the end of this particular work, and let's see.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can stop here today. I don't know.
Yeah, I
due
have
to
like
that.
many more
Yeah.
slides and works,
So
but
this is wonderful.
Yeah.
So when you have n agents,
Yeah.
how does the conversation start? In kind of, do you have a graph kind of representation of the interaction that they? So when an agent names an object, all the other agents can observe it, and that's
No,
the way
so
it
this is a
works?
pairwise, yeah.
Oh, pairwise.
Yeah, it's
so
all pairwise, and then we actually like extending it.
Okay,
for
okay, so
group
wow,
dynamics
okay,
now, yeah.
okay, so it scales as n to the the combination of n agents, all possible combinations, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's called computationally when n becomes large,
Yeah.
it becomes kind of intractable to do that, doesn't it? I mean,
You mean intractable to do all the pairs?
Yeah,
or-
yeah.
yeah. So, but the definition of population round that I've shown here is you create n pairs, n random pairs, and that's one round. Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, but this is really great. Result.
so this is
the
really-
agreement with simulation and theory is really
Yeah.
wonderful.
So this is maybe the last time we met, I presented about the work where we have single AI and then
Right, yeah.
do theory and
Yeah.
test theory on single AI experiment. But then we are thinking about it to extending this paradigm to multi-agents. Yeah.
So another question
Yeah.
from me before I open to the
Mhm.
guys.
Yeah.
So naming game. We know Luke still. He's a really great guy. And so,
Mhm.
how computationally universal do you think is the naming game? How does it
Mhm.
apply to other tasks that we have in the society of agents?
Well, that's a great question.
Consensus formation, moderation, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. So one thing in this particular context of AI, especially, let's say people are now, Dario Amodei famously
Right,
said there's
yeah.
like a collective genius in the GPU
Yeah,
clusters,
yeah.
etc. One key aspect is reasoning there, in the sense that, so in this particular consensus formation, there was no notion of reasoning because let's say some countries are trying to automate this court, lawyers and court with AI, but in that kind of cases, it's really important for people to know whether the decision made by, let's say, collective agents are outcome of thorough reasoning together based on factual knowledge, or if it's random like this, then you don't want to accept the result of the court,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So for the naming game, one key question I'm thinking is how can we include this aspect of like intense reasoning, where are these agents agreeing to some name or convention because of meaningful reasoning together, co-reasoning,
Right.
or is it just something else?
No, I get the
Yeah.
kind of gist of it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, great. So do you guys any? History or Yoshi?
So
Yeah.
where the randomness comes from
Mhm.
in your model.
So-
in your simulation. I
Yeah.
think initial variables of the cells,
Mhm.
right? It's random.
Yes. So
the randomness comes from that.
so
Where because the word choice is in final layer. Final layer.
Yeah, exactly.
Word choice is compared with the random values probably.
Yeah.
So the other layers are perfectly deterministic function to function computation. So no randomness there. So
Yeah, so this is meant as when there's a softmax, etc. It's really like a probability of which of the three token.
So
Yeah.
the calculation of the probability is not the random.
Yeah, exactly. So these
Yeah.
are just representation
Yes.
computed in the transformer, and then from here to here is actual
Yeah.
sampling. Yeah.
That's why you need the agents. So multiple agents. But still, I think still LLM itself, one agent is a kind of probabilistic behavior.
Yeah.
It shows. So it's not so the multiple agent simulation is to getting the data. Multiple agent simulation would be necessary, but as a computation, the LLM itself is a kind of probabilistic. So I think that
Yeah.
to show that result, it should be derived from the single agent. I think it should be. I think. Because the single LLM show the how should I say, not so deterministic. I think the population are not sounds not necessary. In the psychophysical experiment, in terms of psychophysical experiment, that could be okay, but it's a model calculation computation, so it's single brain show the unexpected things.
Yeah, then I think this.
I want to say that part.
One thing is, in all the experiments, it's actually the population was homogeneous population, so it's all GPT-4, all haiku. That was the setup that we did for this particular work. But maybe if we have like multiple LMs or multiple LMs with different persona controlled by the context, etc., then that might show something else.
So the randomness or unexpectedness comes from the initial value of the cells, of the units. It could be random. So I think it is the origin of the uncertainty or something. So it's not comes from the architecture. The architecture itself is a weight distribution function. It's a weight function. So not a random not a random probability difference. The referring randomness with the probability. It's a probabilistic, but the LLM is not probabilistic. Its LLM is a weight transformation. So of course, final stage, the probability differ.
So this is just about the final stage. So the way this is calculated is deterministic.
Yes.
And then from here to here is the only source of randomness, which is driving this drift effect.
So usually, do you have any question?
I have a question. Thank you for wonderful talk. If you design the many body alignment, you have to consider the opinion dynamics between AI agent and humans. Is there a difference between is there the difference between AI agents and humans opinion dynamics?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. And then that's especially represented in. Yeah, so this is really specific for LM right now in the sense that this is the idea, which is to say, Y is output by the speaker, and then XL is the representation of the listener, and then this is saying that when these two people speak, listener always align towards the speaker, right? But then I'm now sitting in the psychology department, and then let's say moral psychologists are doing experiments, and if it's a human, then if someone who are in the same, let's say, who believes in the same political party says opinion, then you might align to them. But then when some political opponent says something, you might want to repel.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so humans have, yeah.
Very great to have a distinction between in-group and out-group.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So, yeah, different terms for...
Yeah, so, like that's one of the extensions that we are thinking right now, in the sense that right now, these agents doesn't have any identity, right? Because there's now a, let's say, some like a religion of AI agent, but then there might be like another one soon, and then they might start phase separate between them. And yeah, so they're like, actually one of the takeaways that I have for the current state of AI is that the fact that most of the AI's behavior can be explained this way is really a source of instability in AI society. Because whichever AI it is, any AI is aligned to be nice to each other. And the niceness is good when you're just talking with just single person in front of you, but when the entire society is nice, then that might be unstable, and like revisiting like Hannah Arendt, and there are a lot of social science studies about what does it even mean to be nice. Is niceness actually always good when everyone in society is nice? And there's like Ken Suzuki always talks about the notion of polarity, and I think it's all related to.
So
that,
there's this famous game theory model, Hawk Dove game, kind of So yeah, I think that's fascinating. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for really great talks, full of food for thought. I think we need real food now. So
yeah, thank you.
Maybe it's time to wrap up. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.